So, what is a safety connection? The safety connection is an opportunity for you to learn more about hot health and safety topics in your own personal workspace. We facilitate an exchange of best practices. It's an opportunity to connect virtually with industry peers and also to really learn, share, and discover what's of value to you. I like to say it's really about picking nuggets of gold out. When you think about panning for gold, like not all of it's gold, but there are going to be some bits in there that you go, I'm going to grab that one. When we talk today about navigating the act and regs, you may already be starting with some level of knowledge or experience in how to use and read the Green Book and the e-laws. Our goal today is to give you some hot tips and tricks. If you're starting right from the beginning, that's totally fine. I've got your back. If you're someone who's got a little bit more experience, you may be picking different little pieces of the puzzle and going, oh, wow, I didn't know that. So yeah, it's about figuring out what's going to work best for you. And we're going to talk both about the Green Book and about e-laws. So whether you prefer an analog experience or a digital experience, we have something here for you. So who am I and why am I here rambling at you? My name is Tova Larson. I'm a health and safety consultant based in Ottawa, Ontario, with Workplace Safety and Prevention Services. I've been with WSPS for 10 years in like 3 days. So we'll say it's almost 10. Super close. Thank you. I'm super excited. It's been an incredible 10 years, and I can't think of an organization that I would rather be a part of than this one. So I'm really grateful for my 10-year anniversary. I have been in the health and safety field, though, for 20 years, and I didn't start my career as a health and safety professional. I started my career as a laboratory chemist, and I've seen the good, bad, and the ugly of what happens when people are not safe at work and when people are not set up to be successful, to be safe. I crushed my right foot working in a welding shop when I was 24 years old. I was a student. I was young. I was new. I'd worked there for like 6 days. So that is why I do what I do. It's why I love what I do. I learned 3 big things when I was hurt. The first thing I learned was that being in pain all the time turned me into a jerk. The second thing I learned was that there's nothing good to watch on TV between the hours of 9 and 5 if you have basic cable. And it's like 2005. There was a lot of like teenagers who were out of control and doing what they wanted in my TV watching. And the third thing I learned was that some people, when they get hurt, they get surprisingly angry. My injury could have been prevented for $30, which is approximately the cost back then at dinner for a family of 4 at McDonald's. And I knew that, and that really it ground my gears. So I decided to go in health and safety to do something productive with the fire in the belly. So that is why I do what I do. It's why I love what I do. And I have also trained more than 12,000 certified members of joint health and safety committees. So in terms of the amount of time that I spend working with the Occupational Health and Safety Act, it is all the time. So this is why I'm here. This is why I think I may have some valuable insights for you. So welcome. Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah, I talk about the story about how I got into safety pretty frequently, partly because I want every young worker who says, oh, it can never happen to me. I was like, well, if it happened to me, it can happen to you. And that sense of invincibility only seems real until you realize it's not. And I realized that very quickly and very catastrophically. All right, we're heading into our poll. Have you used the OHSA and regulations before? Some of you, the answer is going to be no, and that's totally okay. If it's a no, that's cool. You're here learning this for the first time, and I am here for you. If you have used it, have you used the printed copy? Have you used the online version? I think we set this up as a like multiple answer. If you've never used it, that's totally fine. And for the 18% so far, I've said yes, but I've never really been able to find what I'm looking for. You are not alone in this. Yeah, I like for the online, for the ability to search quickly. Timothy, I agree with you. When I first started my career, this was like the tome of my life. And as I have, oh, you can only give one answer. Okay, well, if you've used both, feel free to drop that in the chat or pick the one you use the most. So we've got some folks who've used the printed copy, the ELAWS version, some people who just are like, I just can't find what I'm looking for. Like, I want to use it, but it's hard. Yeah, Michelle's used it online. My follow-up question, this is not a poll, this is just in the chat. What is your greatest challenge in using this information? Is, when we think about finding things, what's your greatest challenge in finding what you need? If you can think of one thing, one big challenge, is it not knowing how to keyword search? Is it, it's the exact wording. Because, yeah, as prescribed. Ooh, Aparna, I have information for you on exactly how to follow this through to find the information you need. Yes, that. Okay. So, search only highlights. That is also a challenge. There's also a little, and when we go into search, there's the search tool built into ELAWS, and then there's the search tool using your browser, and they function a little bit differently. Regulations, codes, and requirements, references to CSA standards. That's also something that we can talk a little bit about. Awesome. Nicely done, folks. You are in the right spot. Regulations and code requirements. These are some of the hottest questions I get in certification. And so we're going to dig in. The first thing that we're going to dig into is navigating the Green Book. So we're going to talk about how to use the Green Book itself. Then we're going to dig into navigating the ELAWS version. Then we are going to dig more into actually the wording, what as prescribed means, where to go looking for that, how to, dig up things in the fire code, how to dig up things in the, when does a CSA standard apply? So we're going to go and talk about that as our module 3. So first, let's talk about the Green Book and the versions of the Act. So we have both the printed copy and the ELAWS version. These are the two main versions that we are using. The printed copy, there are a number of different versions that are out there. Now, WSPS, we provide, and we do have these for sale if you're interested in ordering a copy from us. I have the 2024 version, but we have the 2025 versions coming. This is the worksite safety copy of the Big Green Book. There's also the Thomson Reuters copy. What are the differences? And the King's Printer copy. What are the differences between these copies? The King's Printer version, which you'd probably recognize as that you'd probably recognize with kind of like the more army green color to it. That is the industrial establishments regulation version of this. It doesn't include all of the regulations. Typically, the King's Printer version includes the Act and a selected set of regulations based on the sector for which that book was produced. So if you are in the construction sector, you would have the Act, the construction regulations, asbestos in construction projects and renovations, and then a set of regulations that apply. They would, for instance, not include the healthcare regulation in that book because if you work on a construction site, maybe that's not relevant to you. So they're just trying to cut back on the amount of printing, the amount of thickness, intimidating. I mean, it's just like unwieldy is one way to describe it. In terms of the way the versions are, why do they not have us as an Apple or Android? It's a great question. The workaround for that is to have it on as ELAWS. I think that I can't speak for the ministry or why they don't have it as an Apple or Android app. But I can tell you that the ELAWS version, I use it all the time. I use it on my phone. I use it on my computer, and it is agnostic in the sense that like whether you're using Linux or whether you're using a phone that uses a different operating system, it's always at the web. It's always available, which is great. Who knows? Maybe they'll come up with an app. In terms of how the private sector produced copies are laid out, this one is laid out differently than the Thomson Reuters copy. We'll talk a little bit about indices. We'll talk a little bit about, new this year. but the producers of these lay their stuff out a little bit differently. This one also, part of the reason we like the worksite safety copy here at WSPS is the print is bigger. And it's still not big, but it's bigger. Then there's the eLaws version, which of course it has the benefit that it is the most up to date at any given time, and we're going to be digging into it. So how do we find stuff? And we're going to be talking about these in detail. The physical copy, we can use the table of contents, the index or the section numbers. Table of contents is usually good for finding, I usually use it for finding a part or finding a regulation. The index is good for keyword searching. The drawback, depending on how your index is structured, is sometimes it can lead you down some rabbit holes. One of the biggest common pitfalls that I see in using the Thomson Reuters copy is when I go and look at, for instance, the word age in the index, it lists every reference to the word age in the entire book, but it lists them based on regulation number, which means that I've had people be like, you have to be 16. And I was like, but you don't. And we'll talk about that. You have to run a construction project. It's the first reference, but it doesn't mean that that's the legislation, that's the regulation that's relevant to you. There's also the section number, and we'll talk about how to navigate the page itself in a few minutes. eLaws, we're going to talk about searching. We're going to talk about using the scrollable table of contents, and we're going to be talking about finding based on specific section numbers. So let's dig into navigating the Green Book itself. How many of you actually brought your copy of the Green Book? And it doesn't necessarily have to be the most up-to-date copy, just for the purposes of the activities here. The goal of this is to just get you using it. Okay, so several of you do have Green Books. If you have your Green Book with you, grab your Green Book. If you're watching this pre-recorded in the future, you can hit pause and go get your Green Book now. So please do that. And then you can go start, and I'm going to start moving again. Okay, we're back. Let's go ahead and talk a little now about how to navigate the Green Book. Benefits and drawbacks of using the Green Book. There are lots of benefits to it. It is really easy to access. Most workplaces have one. It's on the health and safety board. And if you don't have one, that's totally okay. We're going to be digging into eLaws as well. And this session is being recorded. So if you do order a Green Book, oh, someone has their hand up. Just a quick note about the hands up. Your mics and cameras are disabled. So if you're like, I put my hand up to tell me that you have a Green Book, 2 thumbs up. If you have a question, though, be sure to put the question into the chat because I'm not able to unmute your mic. Oh, no worries. But yeah, that's just a heads up on questions. And I also take questions at any point. So if you're thinking that you're going to like hold questions right for the end, don't. Drop the questions in the chat now. Why not? There's no harm. So let's talk a little bit about benefits and drawbacks of the Green Book. Most workplaces have one. It's up on the board. That's what the little hole is for, is so that you can stick a string and stick it on the board. Do not do what one of my the clients that I was working with did. I gave them, I kindly gave them a Green Book. They were really struggling. And I came back a week later and discovered that they had put a string on it, which was great, but they had tied it to the water heater for reasons that made absolutely no sense, given that it is nowhere near their safety board. I was as confused as you are. So that's what the hole is for. Most workplaces have one, which is great. You don't need electronic devices. You don't need data. This is great for bush sites, construction sites, work vehicles when you don't always have access to the internet. It's also great for folks that are less tech savvy. Not everybody is super into computers. And if you've got a team that is like, ooh, computers, this is definitely the better of the two choices for you. And be sure that you do help your staff learn how to use this. There are drawbacks, though. It is often out of date. They go out of date like these things age like milk, okay? So when we talk about the legislative changes, last year we had at least 4 major legislative updates to the Green Book in a single year. By the time this thing hit print, it was very close to being out of date. Also, I see workplaces that buy one Green Book, they stick it up on their health and safety board, and they never replace it. if you are going with a physical copy, be sure that you are getting a new one every single year. That way, you are not stuck with a 2011 Green Book, or one workplace I went to that had a 2004 Green Book on their health and safety board. It also, these don't change as the legislation changes. I have small hands, so it's actually rather difficult for me to use with my tiny little, T-Rex hands. The print is small. If you're somebody of a certain age, and I'm 44 years old, this can be an issue. Even just the size of this thing can make an average person just look at it and go, yeah, no. Like, it's too much. I don't know how to use this. It's complicated. I'm out. Again, I've noticed that people who work with their hands do not like to use the computer. Yeah, it really depends on the person. And we're all different, right? Like, there are folks that are like super computer savvy. There are folks that do both. My brother was a precision machinist. He was a CNC millwright, but he was also super computer savvy because he's working with computer, guided equipment. And then there are folks that are, like some of my relatives who are like, they're ranchers. They ranch wild horses and they own a computer. They do not have working cell phones at the ranch. And yeah, they really don't use the internet at all. Doug is a wonderful guy, but computers are not his thing. Yeah, so I don't ever assume that somebody is not a computer person, but also don't ever assume somebody is a computer person. They may or may not be. Let's talk first, and if you do have, this is the worksite safety copy, but if you have your Green Book, grab it and let's go right to the first page of the table of contents. And if you have a different copy, that's totally cool. Just grab the copy you have, if it's Thomson Reuters, if it's Lake King's printer, and let's take a look at what's in the table of contents and how to use this. So I've scanned a copy of the table of contents here. The first thing to note is we have the name. In this case, we're looking at the act. The name here is in bold. It's like in white on black in that strip. So in the Occupational Health and Safety Act, it says that it starts on page 1, which is awesome. If you have a copy that has a preface to it, such as the folks at Thomson Reuters, you might have a whole bunch of Roman numerals in the front pages. You have to then go to actual page 1, not the Roman numerals. Those Roman numerals are all like blah blah blah, changes to the act, reporting requirements, all kinds of like bits and pieces of information. So we want to make sure that we're getting past, and there's really good information in it. If you do have the Thomson Reuters copy, read the preface. But it is, the Roman numeral numbers are not the same as the actual page numbers. So we have our Occupational Health and Safety Act. Then we have the parts. So if I know, for instance, that I am looking for information about the right to refuse work, I can see here that part 5 is right to refuse or stop work. And I can go directly to, and there are the page numbers, page 86, which will take me directly to the page, that the beginning of that part. Does that mean that I'm necessarily looking at the exact section number that I need? No, but it's going to be the beginning of the part that I know that's probably going to be in. If I am, let's say I'm a supervisor and I'm looking for my duties, I can see duties of employers and other persons is in part 3. So I could go to page 52 and go and look at everybody's duties. That's one way to navigate this using the table of contents. The table of contents is most useful if you're looking for a part, or you're looking for a regulation by name, or if you're looking for a regulation by number. And why? So regulations are listed by name. In this case, they are listed in kind of a descending order of like most often referenced. In the case of those that work in industrial establishments, that is the regulation that they're probably going to refer to the most. So they actually put it directly after the act. In the other copies, sometimes you don't have all the regulations. Sometimes they're listed alphabetically. it really is kind of a, different copies are structured differently, but use your table of contents to go find your regulations. We again have the name of the regulation in the black strip. Then we have the number of the regulation directly underneath that. The construction regulation is regulation 213-91. And then, of course, they give a page number. So that's how we navigate the table of contents. And those are some of the times when we use the table of contents. For clarification, I put a link to ELAWs on the devices throughout a location. Amazing. I do not need the physical copy on our board. Or can I put a QR code to the ELAWs on our board? That's a great question. And we are going to, I am actually going to use that as an example when we go dig it up. So hold your question and I will answer it in a few minutes, but I want to actually go find it in the OHSA, what it says about providing information virtually. Yeah, we have multiple boards and all but a few are digital. Okay, cool. We will talk about that. Using the index, this is all about keyword searching. So if you're looking for particular words, you're able to go find them, and it lists both the, in this case, we're looking at refusal to work, reprisals. There we go, reprisals. The photo of this is not great. It didn't scan particularly well. But you'll notice that there are a number of different references to reprisal, and then a number of different page numbers that are associated with that. But you'll notice that it also gives the section numbers next to each. So it gives you the page number, you go to the page number, then you go look for the section number. So what I'm going to suggest is if you do have a green book, that we go and actually look for the word age. And let's say that we work at you work in a commercial kitchen. Okay. You're working in a commercial kitchen. We're going to go into the index. And if you do have the worksite safety copy, one of the things that you'll notice is that it has multiple indices. It has an index specifically for the Occupational Health and Safety Act, just the Act. Then it has an index for industrial establishments regulation, which is just the index for the industrial establishment regulation. They have a separate one for construction, a separate one for WHMIS, a separate one for chemical and biological agents, confined spaces, healthcare. Then they have one that's for like all of the other like 1 and 2 pager, like the shorter regulations. That's all a consolidated table of contents. So that means that you might need to look for a number of different table of contents to be able to find what you're looking for. So let's go and first start in the index looking for the word age, literally age, AGE. How old do you have to be to work at a particular workplace? All right, so has anyone found the reference to age yet? You've got your green book using the index. Okay, so if you have, drop it in the chat what page you are going to look on. And do note if it's somebody who has one of the other copies rather than worksite safety. Okay, so you're looking at page 606. And what do you know what is that going to be in a regulation? Is that going to be in the Act? Page 124. Okay, so Camille, what version of the Green Book do you have? So different folks have different versions. Page 539, 193, lots of different versions. Okay, he's got the Thomson Reuters. Excellent. Can you refer to titles rather than pages? Yes, definitely. So one of the things that I'd like you to go and find, I have the Green Book and nothing shows age. Have you looked in, does your Green Book have an index? If it doesn't, okay, and which version do you have? Getting the same as you, page 145. So what I'd like you to do is we're going to go and find the word age in the act itself. In the copy I have, in the act, rather than in the regulations, we'll go there later. I am on page 143, but ultimately, this is index for the act. That's industrial establishments. Yeah, I'm not getting any reference to age in the worksite safety copy, but I can tell you that it's in employer duties. You've got the OSG book. So let's go look in the industrial establishment now. When we see the general duty, employers have to ensure that you are of such age that you cannot have folks that are in the workplace, in or about the workplace, or working in the workplace that are under the age prescribed. So for those of you that said, I'm looking at page 145 in the Thomson Reuters copy, go to page 145 and tell me what regulation you're in. Crane. Interesting. 21391, section 16. This is the info I have. Okay, this is where things get interesting, especially if you have a copy that has a consolidated index, is that that's only one of the references to age. It's the first one, but it doesn't mean it's the one that you work in. Aparna, do you work on a construction site? Not now, right? So that reference is specifically in the construction regulation I did earlier. Yeah. So that's one of the challenges with using the index is you need to know as you dig through, you may find that you look at a keyword and that keyword finds its way into multiple regulations, some of which do not apply to your workplace. You're using this for school. Yeah. So if you worked in a commercial kitchen, and I picked that on purpose, how do we know what part of the Act or regulations? How do we know where we are in the book? Let's do a quick, industrial. So in the case of, why did I pick a commercial kitchen? Because it's considered industrial. We'll talk about that in a second. All right, so 851, page 523. Now, rather than pages, let's go and look in industrial establishments. And how can we figure out where we are in the book? If you're looking for the industrial establishment regulation, remember we said, let's start with the table of contents. If you know you're looking for industrial, we can go here. If you've used the index and you found the word age under industrial establishments, you can go directly to that page. But ultimately, we're looking for industrial establishment. All right, what does the industrial establishment section 4 say about age? Does it say 16? It does not say 16. It specifically says, and it doesn't say 15 either. That's for logging. Yeah, it lists 3 different ages. What are they? And how do they differ? Does it look like there are different ages for different kinds of work? The type of work. So what type of work does the age 15 apply to? Yeah, so it does depend on the work. So if I'm 15, I can work where? In a factory. Is it 16 for a kitchen? It's 16 for what? $16 is specifically for logging. Now, if I want to go work in an office, which is not a factory or a logging operation, how old would I have to be? You're lost. Okay, so in terms of, we'll be coming back to this. We're going to head into how to read the page in a second, and that might help. Yeah, you have to be 14 to work in an office. By the way, I got my first pay by the hour job working in a commercial kitchen when I was 11 years old. Legal, not legal, just based on what we found. Legal, not legal. What do you think? Not. And it was also the first workplace injury I ever witnessed. Not legal today. It wasn't legal then either, as it turns out. My head chef cut her index finger off down to the second knuckle. She realized pretty quickly the only thing worse than cutting her finger off was leaving her illegal child laborer to finish dinner service for 85 people alone. So she stuck her finger in a styrofoam cup, stuck it in the walk-in fridge, and proceeded to finish the shift with a glove on her hand. 5 hours later, going to the emergency room only to discover the finger was no longer reattachable. This is why it's so important to read what the regulations say about the word age, because the consequences are not always, although often are, consequences that severely injure a child. In this case, it just traumatized a child, and that's still not a great outcome. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about how to read the page. Let's open your green book, and your page might be a little bit different in terms of the way they're laid out is typically the same. I am currently looking at page 52 and 53 of my book, but where I want you to look is we are currently looking at part 3, duties of employers and other people. One other hot tip I have for you is to do some arts and crafts before we get into this. You might be like, why is the page colored green, Tova? Because I colored it green. I use the act the most. So I find every year the beginning and the end of the act, and I literally just color the side of the page in with a marker. That way, every single time I go to reference the act, I can go directly to the act without discovering that I ended up in a regulation somewhere. Arts and crafts time. Highly recommended. So as you look at the page, at the top in the center, you will find, is it the act? Is it the industrial establishment regulation? Is it the construction regulation? That is really important information. We also get on the top center right of the page is the part that you're in. The part, especially if you know the parts of the act, you can help know if I know that I need to go to part 5 and I'm at part 3, I know that I'm a little further along. The very first thing I do as soon as I open this book is I always look at that top center of that page, of that left page. Another thing that you can use are the sections at the top of the pages. So this on the left-hand page, it is the very first thing right here on the top of that left-hand page. So if you know you're looking for section 25, for instance, and this says section 22, subsection 8, you know that you're not quite there yet. But you know that this very first thing is section 22, subsection 8. Now, what is in the top right-hand corner, rather than being the first thing, it's actually the last thing on the bottom of that page. So if I know I am looking for section 25, which is employer duties, and I know the number 25 is between 22 subsection 8 and 25 subsection 1 clause D, I know that the start of that section is gonna be in there somewhere. It's gonna have to be on those 2 pages. One of the most critical things to know about how to use those little numbers at the top to guide you is you have to get into the right spot first. Because as soon as I flip into the industrial establishment regulation, the numbers at the top start again. So if all you do is search around using these numbers without ever looking at that top left of the page to see whether you're in an act or regulations or something like that, you may find yourself looking at the wrong Section 25. Section 25 of the Industrial Establishment Regulation talks about machine guarding, for instance, specifically nip guards. So if I was looking for employer duties, it's not going to be the same. I need to be sure that I'm looking at Section 25 of the Act. Another thing that you can use are, of course, the page numbers. These are at the bottom of the pages. If you're using the index or you are using the table of contents, these are the page numbers that you're looking for, not the numbers at the top. And we also have the little side tabs. Now, on the Thomson Reuters copy, the side tab won't have the name of the regulation. It will have just the number of the regulation. In the worksite safety copy, it does have the name, but not the number. So in this case, this page has OH and S Act written on that little tab. In the case of the Thomson Reuters copy, that's helpful. I can't believe I've never seen that before. And you'll notice there are little black blocks in the side. This first black block is the Act, and it says Act. And then from there, I can use the little numbers at the top to be able to fine tune where I need to be. You are so welcome. This is why we have this session. This is why we're doing this, because these are the little things that sometimes folks don't notice. Okay, so you've got, I'm just opening up your picture, Occupational Health and Safety Act. And so I think this one is the worksite safety copy. Yeah, and again, structured in their case, thanks for sharing that. Again, it's a different copy. It's got cutouts and little colors for each one of these. Again, allows you to be able to find things really easily. That is also a lovely way to do things. Another thing that I'll sometimes do, especially for things that I use often, is I will, every year that I get my copy, I will go and take sticky notes and be like, okay, I use employer duties and employer supervisor worker duties a lot. I'm going to put a little sticky note that says employer duties, supervisor duties, so that they're really easy for me to find. Because this is my book. This is not somebody else's book. I can turn this into whatever I want, as long as I don't change the wording in it, to make it easier for me. Oh, it looks like the Industrial Safety Trainers version. Yeah, I had that in 2024. So yeah, different versions. Obviously, we provide the worksite safety copy. It mostly pitch that a little bit. But there is no right or wrong way to have a green book. One of the things I would encourage you to do if you do have the black blocks on the side is to actually go and look at what these say, because that little black block actually has the information about what regulation this is. Some of them are really skinny. If there's only one page, those are a little easier to find using the table of contents usually. But yeah, that's how we use those little tabs, and that's how we actually navigate the page itself. One of the things you also notice is that in this, we went from one part to another, and you'll see the words part 3, and this is the beginning here of part 3 right there. Awesome. All right, let's move on to talking a little bit. That's a little bit about how we navigate the Green Book itself. So now that we've seen that, I know there was someone who said, I'm lost. Let's go and follow the same activity before in your own Green Book. And depending on what copy you have, you're going to look for Industrial Establishments Regulation. You can look in the table of contents if you know you're looking for industrial. You can look in the index. In this case, for worksite safety, you actually have to look in the index for the Industrial Establishment Regulation. And I have to stick my face above this because if I don't, it blurs it out. And you'll find that the word age shows up on page 143, and it would be section 4 of this particular copy. Your copy may be different. Yeah. There you go. When you say 141, 145, which copy do you have? Yeah, So different copies are going to have different page numbers. Ultimately, the thing that's going to be the same are the section numbers. So even if you can find, I can't search it in the index. Okay, so let's go into industrial establishment. And this is one of the drawbacks of the Green Book, is not every Green Book is the same. If we did this same activity using eLaws, which we will, you will find it infinitely easier, Fawn, like 1,000 times easier. So let's go and move into talking about eLaws. So we're going to learn more about how to navigate the eLaws version. Pros and cons. One of the main pros is this is always kept up to date. Even as the legislation changes through the year, it's mobile friendly. If you've got Wi-Fi or you've got data, you have your Green Book in something that actually fits in your pocket, because I have never seen a world where this fits in any pocket of women's clothing. I don't think it fits in men's clothing either, but I have a personal, have you seen women's pockets? This barely fits in women's pockets. This isn't going to fit in anybody's pocket. Pocket version. This is really the pocket version, though, is the eLaws version. It's the easiest to keyword search by a lot. You can copy and paste directly from it, which is magical. Yeah, and this is one of the challenges of the Green Book. Ultimately, the best tip I have to use in the Green Book is to spend some time with whatever Green Book copy you got and go and put some of those tabs in. Figure out what's in the index, what's not, and if you can't find something, go to eLaws because you'll probably find it there. Other reasons I think the eLaws is amazing, you can cut and paste. I do this all the time. Yeah, Nevena. Yeah, it's a great point. This is one of the challenges with the sessions. Everybody's got a different Green Book. The one that I have, the worksite safety copy had age in the industrial regulation index specifically. Different indexes for different things, which is a huge improvement over the Thomson Reuters copy. There's a reason that we moved to this, and it was that the indexes were easier to use. The print is bigger. It's also spread out a little bit more. You can't really see it very well, but it's not all jammed together. There's actually like spaces between them. So even just from a visual standpoint, this is a lot easier to actually read. So this is why we chose the worksite safety copy over some of the other copies. In terms of the copy and paste function on eLaws, makes it really easy to write a recommendation or write something for your staff. There are there's also compatibility with screen readers. So if you're looking for a Green Book that is accessible to someone with a visual disability, this is a great option. I don't know if you can get these in Braille, but I can tell you that Braille printing is quite large, and this in a Braille print would be extremely large. One other nice thing about auto translation is that if you want this in French, you can order these in French, but French English, you can do that with a click of a button on the eLaws version. How about Book on Tape? I don't know if it's available on Book on Tape, but I'm fairly sure that if you contact the King's Printer, they probably have a list of all of the various accessible formats that the King's Printer would have available for you. And you might be surprised what they either have available or can make available. Yeah, it's also a great point. We sometimes don't think about the accessibility side of wanting to be sure that this information is accessible to all of our staff. And this is something that we want to consider. There are drawbacks to the eLaws version. You need to have access to either a computer or a mobile device. You need to have access to the internet. It's not on an app. And you do need some basic computer skills to be able to access it. In terms of using it on your phone, if you can order food on this, you can do this. Trust me. AI can make a podcast. Yeah, you could. That's also a possibility. One of the other interesting things about the law, why are there so many different copies? I've had this question that said, are there approved copies? And you don't need approval from the King's Printer to actually go and create something like this as legislation, because legislation is not copyrighted. So long as you are printing it with correct information and verbatim, these are not bound by copyright. So heads up on that. All right, moving on. Let's talk about the landing page. What's on the landing page? First, go and check to see that you actually landed on the right piece of legislation. If you started with the big list and you just went to e-laws, you'd have to scroll down to find Occupational Health and Safety Act. If you Google Occupational Health and Safety Act, it'll take you right here. We also want to look for the regulations tab. If you're ever looking for a regulation made under the OHSA, you will find it by clicking on the regulations tab. We're going to do a demo. Don't worry. Demo coming on the next couple slides. There's the scrollable content on the side, which is, if you're looking for a specific section, is like chef's kiss. It's so good. So good, people. It's so good. You know how excited I was to see this. They did recently update e-laws to make it easier to use. This is one of those functions, and I think I screamed for joy at my desk. There's keyword, and the keyword works so well. It's so good. There's the historical versions. If you want to know what the legislation was like last year, you can go there and go and take a look at all of the various versions. And then we have the auto translate, and there's one at the top, there's one at the bottom, but that is how you toggle from English to French. So if you're looking for French resources, I know we have some folks here from Eastern Ontario, that's a way that you can connect your staff with les ressources en français. We are going to, I'm going to do a share screen, but we are going to do a tour of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and I'm going to show you kind of what's in it. Then we're going to move on to talking about some of the words. So if you want to click on the big orange book here, you can go ahead and click on that. That will open the e-laws for you. What I am going to do is I'm going to stop sharing my presentation, and I'm actually going to start sharing a window. And so now you can see my window. And when I'm going to the Occupational Health and Safety Act, this is what I do. I literally put OHSA ONT into the Google search bar. In this case, it's Bing. And I just hit enter. That's it. Now, what comes up? You'll notice that both of these are purple because I've clicked on them both. You will see one that says RSO 1990 and another one that says Occupational Health and Safety Act. You want RSO 1990. That's the actual law. This other thing here, it is going to be sent to you. It is the ministry's guide to the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Still a fantastic document. But we are going to click on Occupational Health and Safety Act. Now, if I just went to e-laws ONT for Ontario, I get to e-laws. And what I get is all the laws. So I would go to O for Occupational Health and Safety Act. I can search by title. They also have the search function. And let's see what comes up. Occupational Health and Safety Act. You get all the regulations, Occupational Therapy Act, Occupational Health and Safety Act. And it takes me back to the same place. So when you see versions, if I hit show 48 more, you can see how many times the OHSA changed in 2024. So there was a version that was current from January 2024 to March 31st, April 1st to October 27th, October 28th to December 18th, December 19th to December 31st, and then we have our current copy, which is current as of January 1st of 2025. And you can see the currency date, May 12th, 2025. Now I'm going to go and show less, and we're going to show a bit more about the keyword search. Before we do, though, let's go and quickly mention if you don't want to go and spend, I don't remember what these are, $20, $25, each year, you can go and print the OHSA from the interwebs literally by hitting print. It's right here, right above regulations under this act. You hit print, you can download it to Word. I do not recommend that you download to Word and then save it to your computer. I think that's a bad idea, and I'll tell you why. Because once you've downloaded that, it's a snapshot in time of what the OHSA was when you downloaded it. If you are not going to the eLaws version every single time you use the act, you may end up working with outdated legislation. This is always up to date. Hitting print, stapling it with a mega stapler, and then sticking it on the board, that I think is condonable. Just make sure that you are printing it as it changes. Let's take a look at the keyword search. So if I go here to the keyword search and I look for the word age in the act, I hit go, it shows all kinds of things that have 3 letters that start with, and there are 83 hits. So I'm going to go down, and it says R. R is close to age. Ooh, there are a lot of these. There's R, R, R. Ooh, we're not getting age. Let's try exact search. Okay, I have 2 hits now. That is a lot more manageable. Only employ in or about a workplace a person over such age as may be prescribed, not knowingly permit a person who is under such age as may be prescribed to be in or about a workplace. See how much easier that was to go and find that in the act using the keyword search. There are also, by the way, with the eLaws version, there are instructions on how to use your keyword search. Now, we have how to use eLaws, glossary, important notes. One of the things that you'll notice as you scroll down here is how to search by title or keyword. The legislation pages, there's a whole, if you forget everything I tell you, you can click on how to use eLaws. How to search eLaws and what operators to use. If you're looking for human rights, it will give you all the things containing human or rights or both in any order. If you put human and rights, it still works as no operator. So you have to use capital, and you have to use capital letters when you're using the and. Same with the or. If you use quotes, it's going to look for a particular multi-word phrase in that order of the phrase. If you go with or, it excludes a word from your, not excludes a word, or allows you to look for more than one specified term. If you use the slash with a number, you can actually decide how many words you want in between the 2 search terms. You can use a question mark as an interchangeable character because there are so many different ways we spell the word license. For instance, are you looking for license with a C, license with an S? I don't know, put a question mark in there. If your spelling is not magical, and I know that I'm not always the best speller in the world, you can just be like, I don't know. And away you go. We also have the ability to put X or Y. So fishing or hunting and licenses is a good example of combining multiple operators at once. There are also special characters that we can use. There's email versus e-mail that can create issues. So it really does come down to, again, this is right in the eLaws that you can go and dig that up. Always recommended. That's a little bit about how to find things using the search term. Sometimes I want exact search, sometimes I don't. Let's talk now about the scrollable table of contents. It, as you can see, is scrollable. So if I know I'm looking for a specific section, you can see the various parts. I can click on these. If I'm looking for definitions, I can click right on that section. If I know I'm looking for section 3, duties of employers and other people, I can scroll down to that and I can click on going to part 3. If I wanted to go and find section 42 right away, I can just go click on section 42 and it takes me right there. And then just scroll a little bit and you're at the spot where you want. So really, really helpful on the side here. I often end up looking for offenses and penalties, which, by the way, continue to go up. If you haven't had a chance to look at the new penalties, I highly recommend that you take a look at your ELAWs in section 66. You might be surprised. One of the nice things about the OHSA is, and when we think about that little tour that I said, we're going to do a quick tour. What are parts? Parts organize the OHSA into, they collect up ideas about one thing together. So all of the application ideas are in part one. All of the, enforcement, the powers of the inspectors about orders and stop work orders and, appeals of orders, that's all contained in the enforcement part. All of the duties and responsibilities around workplace violence and harassment are in their own part. So if you know you're having a violence and harassment related conversation, you can scroll right down here and it takes you right to this particular part. There are only two specific types of hazards that have their own part. One of them is violence and harassment, and the other is, in fact, hazardous materials. So they call it toxic substances, but there it is. So that's a little bit about how to use the scrollable table of contents, a little bit about how to use our keyword search. I'm going to go and check in because I can't actually see the chat right now. I'm going to go and check in on the questions. What happens if I use the green book and the meantime laws have changed? Will I end up using old information? Yeah, that's exactly what happens. In terms of how the act works, if let's say that there was an offense that occurred today, it would be the act that's in force on the date of the offense that applies to that particular offense. If the act changes in 6 months and the ministry does not, in fact, work with the Crown prosecutor to lay charges for a year after the offense, it is the historical version of the act that was in force at the time of the offense that is the version of the act under which all of your prosecution and penalties would be based. So yeah, if you're using a green book and it's out of date, you could be giving somebody wrong advice. You could be finding yourself believing that your penalty would be lower than it would be because the penalties just seem to go up. It's really, really important that you have the right information, and the most up-to-date information is the right information for today. If you were looking at something, I've been involved in preparing for legislative and preparing for a defense. We were looking at the legislation that was historical because that was the legislation that was in force at the time of the offense. Sean, is each section classed as its own document for searching purposes? It's not. Each of the act is, and then each of the regulations is. Yeah, it looks better to use ELAWs. It is a lot easier to use, and it really makes sure, does it search everything within ELAWs? No. It searches only that particular, so it's not that each section, so we'll talk about sections, subsections in a second. The sections are not their own document, but the act is its own document. The industrial establishment regulation is its own document. And you will not. Let's go and take a look at confined spaces then. So you can still see my screen. I am clicking on regulations under this act. And here we get all of the regulations that are made under the OHSA. There are other regulations that apply in workplaces separate from these. A good example would be the first aid regulation, which is Regulation 1101, is not made currently under the OHSA. It's made under the WSIA, the Workplace Safety and Insurance Act. So it's not actually in this list. If you were looking for the requirements for your first aid kit, you actually have to go and look for that. But if we went to back to e-laws, there is a way to search all of e-laws, at least for something like confined space. I would go to search by title. And look, confined spaces regulation is the very first thing that pops up, but it also shows up in the first the firefighter regulation, diving operations, industrial establishments, healing and radiation protection arts, talks about space but not confined. You can see how this search term finds both confined and space. There's one in healthcare facilities. We see the word confined in Correctional Services Act. And by the way, here you can see regulation under Occupational Health and Safety Act, and then you can click on the number to go to confined spaces. Regulation under Fire Protection and Prevention Act, firefighter certification. So it's really important as you look at this that you look to see what regulation is this under. Ask, does this act apply to the type of work I'm doing? And that is another way for us to get to the confined spaces regulation. As we come back to the list of regulations, this is another way, and they are listed in the opposite order, the reverse order to which they are made. So the most recent regulation that was made, washroom facilities records of cleaning, is the very first one. One of the things you'll also notice is the regulation names. OREG, Ontario Regulation 480-24. 480 is the order, that's the number in which that regulation was made in that particular year. Regulations change quite frequently, but this is the first time this regulation was made. And so it actually gets a number 24 because it was made in 2024. You can see that the farming regulation, OREG 414-05, was actually introduced in 2005 as a result. There are others that don't have a regulation number. There are RO 1990, and this reflects the fact that there was a regulatory update, a large regulatory update in 1990, where all of these regulations were updated at the same time. It used to be that we did these every 10 years. Now we update much more frequently than that. So if I'm looking for industrial establishments, I'm going to click on that. Now, when I keyword search in this, I am only searching within industrial establishments. I'm going to go and look for the word age again. And you'll see that there are a pile of hits, but many of them are probably R's, or they're based on, the word cage or something that is similar. So and if you're not getting the hits you want, try truncating the number of letters you use. I'm going to go and click exact search. And here we go. Section 4, subject to subsection 2, the minimum age of a worker or a person who's permitted to be in or about an industrial establishment shall be 16 years of age in a logging operation, 15 years of age in a factory other than a logging operation, and 14 years of age in a workplace other than a factory. But you also notice that we have a subsection 2 that explains a bunch of exceptions. Clause 1B does not apply to a person who, while in the industrial establishment, is accompanied by a person who's attained the age of majority, is being guided on a tour, is in an area used for sales purposes, is in an area to which the public generally has access. That's how you can take your kids to the grocery store. That's also an industrial establishment. Then they also talk about does not apply to workers in entertainment. And then it actually goes and defines that. So that's a little bit about how to find things here. And this is only looking in this particular regulation. If you're looking in all the regulations, you can keyword search the way we did using confined space, but it only looks at the titles. So there isn't with e-laws a way to be able to look at the whole Green Book as a whole, like there is in the sort of Thomson Reuters style version of the Green Book. But the benefit is that this prevents you from going into places that you shouldn't. I remember somebody from a daycare center telling me that they were freaking out because the Green Book said they needed a hyperbaric chamber. And I was like, where does it say that? And they're like, it's in the diving regulation. I was like, do you do underwater diving? And she's like, no, I work in a daycare. I was like, you don't need that. It's not a regulation that applies to you. So, this is the reason why I actually encourage you to look in the individual regulations rather than going and using the whole Green Book and being led down a bunch of rabbit holes. This is a lot easier to do. So in terms of what the tour of the OHSA, it starts with definitions. So we're going to talk a little bit about those in a second. The important words are here. If you want to know, and by the way, each of the regulations always starts with definitions. Section 1 is always definitions. Went back to the OHSA, and you'll find in the OHSA, again, starts with definitions. So words like competent person, worker, employer are there. We'll talk about those in a second. You'll notice this is grayed out, by the way. Anything that's grayed out is not yet in force. It's not July 1st, 2025 yet. On the day named by proclamation of the Lieutenant Governor, subsection 1, subsection 1 of the Act is amended by the following definition, and this will come into force on July 1st. So you can even scroll down and see coming pieces of legislation by looking for things that are grayed out. You'll see workplace violence is defined, workplace harassment is defined. It goes on to then talk about application. What and who does the Act apply to and who does it not? Does it apply to private residences? Does not apply to private residences or the lands or appurtenances used in connection therewith. However, you'll notice that 1.1 says, despite subsection 1, this Act applies to telework performed in or about a private residence or the lands and appurtenances used in connection therewith. So there's a section, and then there's another explanatory section. In application, they talk about farms and teachers and self-employed people. If those apply to you, go take a look. You'll also notice it lists a whole bunch of sections. It says, blah, blah, blah. This doesn't apply, except all of these sections. This is a great example of the Act referring back to itself, and we'll see that in a couple of moments. Part 2 is administration, some of the high-level things, powers of the Minister of Labor, powers of the committees, powers of the health and safety representatives. That's all found in Part 2, which is quite lengthy. All the JHSC stuff is there, so go and take a look in it at Section 9 if you have a JHSC. We also then find, as we keep scrolling, we get into Part 2.1, Prevention Council, Chief Prevention Officer, Designated Entities. WSPS is a designated entity. This is the piece of the legislation that establishes us and our mandate, along with the Prevention Council and the Chief Prevention Officer. His name is Dr. Joel Moody, and he's super cool. If you ever have a chance to meet him, I'm definitely a fangirl. Moving on to Part 3, duties of employers and other people. And you'll notice again, grayed out stuff about washrooms coming into force on July 1st, 2025. This is where we find duties of licensees, employers, supervisors. This is quite, again, employer duties are quite lengthy. Duties of employers continued. Duties of employers, more duties. Then we get to duties of supervisor, duties of workers, consent, duties of owners, mining plants, washroom access, project owners, directors and officers of corporation. If you own a business, you need to read these. Then we get to violence and harassment. All of those policy and program requirements are there. Codes of practice. Your ministry can approve codes of practice. We do have a code of practice now. It's, by the way, about harassment programs. Toxic substances. There's a whole part on that about WHMIS and safety data sheets and assessment. It generally says your employer's not allowed to poison you at work, and they have to provide you with a whole pile of information. Then we get to Part 5, right to refuse or stop work. This is actually where your right to refuse is found, but also the limitations on your right to refuse. It also contains stuff for certified members, so bilateral and unilateral work stoppages. We move in then to reprisals prohibited by employer. Part 6, your employer's not allowed to penalize you in any way for trying to exercise your rights or duties under the Act, and we'll talk about rights and duties. Notices. When do you need to notify the MLITSD that something bad has happened, like a critical injury, a fatality, an occupational disease, a disabling injury, a fire, explosion, or violence-causing injury? Part 8 is all about enforcement. This is where the inspector powers are detailed in this extremely lengthy section 54. Then they talk about orders, in harassment investigations, warrants, power to seize, orders by inspectors, stop work orders, appeals of orders, powers of the Internal Labor Relations Board, the fact that you're not allowed to obstruct inspectors, there's confidentiality. And then we move in to offenses and penalties. So it lists various people, owners and directors, corporations, not a person, but an entity, as well as individuals. And aggravating factors. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at the aggravating factors, they're also relatively new. Talk about trials and then regulations. I'm going to save you a half hour of long, boring reading. The regulations part, the whole thing effectively says in a lot of detail, there are regulations made under this act and they have to be followed like they are the law because they are the law. That's the little tour of what's in the act itself. We're now going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to go back to the presentation. I can say that, very cool guy, right? What about the activity being done, such as using a scissor lift? Ooh, great question. Can we use a QR code with the Green Book since we don't have to buy the book every year? If you are providing your staff, if you're expecting them to use their own devices to scan it and to access it, I would say no. Unless you are providing devices, if you are going to do a digital health and safety board, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you do that, your staff need to have ready access to a computer at all times. They need to be computer savvy, and you need to train them on exactly how to access that health and safety board virtually. Like literally send them a video or sit them down in front of your like little intranet hub and go, okay, see the link that says join that says health and safety board? You click on that. Okay, now we're going to go click on the thing that says ACT, and it brings up the OHSA. That is the level that I would say is required. Don't just provide a QR code and expect people, like I'm never scanning a QR code in the wild with my device, ever. A talking moose just got my credit card information. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how to use and read this. Back to navigating DACNEGS. Got a few minutes for my remaining slides. So we did the quick tour. We're now going to talk about understanding how all of these pieces work together. So your regulatory landscape includes the Act, which sets out the basic duties and basic principles, but you'll find the words are really broad and general. Words like machine, device, or thing, as prescribed. What does that mean? Go look in the regulations for more detail. You need to find more specific detail. The OHSA tells you what to do. The Act tells you, or the Act tells you what to do. The regulations tell you how to do this. One of the things you noticed with age was that the Act says you can't employ or have people in the workplace that are underage. You go, well, what do you mean by underage? Then we looked in the regulations for more detail on exactly that, what that meant in industrial. If you were on a construction site, it's totally different. There's no bring your kid to work day on a construction site. They have to be 16 to work there or even be there. There's nothing that says, oh, they're just on a tour. What if it's a part of the construction site that the public generally has access to? No, none of that's there. It's different for different regulations, and we'll talk about that in a second. There are codes. What you'll find is the OHSA will say, you have to, as prescribed, go look. There we go. Really bad at drawing things in the regulation. And then the regulation will say, go look in the codes. And we'll see that. Some of them even say, the Occupational Health and Safety actually says, oh, you have to go follow a code. Or they'll say that you have to follow the standard, or a regulation will say it. Often the code will say it. That's how CSA standards flow up into your legislative landscape. There are guidelines by the MLITSD. If you've got beer kegs, you need to read this. If you have supervisors, you need to read their supervisor guideline. We can include that in the thank you email. Hi, Jessica. And PSR. There's a great guideline on that. And again, they don't print it. They want you to access the version online so you have the most up-to-date one. If changes are made to the legislative after the most recent Green Book publication, then why can't employers just provide a current copy of the Occupational Health and Safety Act? In what way? By providing the link to the e-laws and training people how to get there, you are providing the most up-to-date version. You can also go print it. If you're doing printed copies, you can go and print the most up-to-date version just off your own printer. That's another option. But ultimately, you want to make sure that your staff are getting the right information. Like the old version of the Green Book, many moons ago, says that the maximum penalty for an individual is $25,000, and it is absolutely not. It's $500,000 today. There are different regulation types. There are some that are sector specific, things like mines and industrial and construction. There are some that are specific to types of hazardous work, like we saw the confined spaces regulation. There's one for window cleaning. There's one for diving that I was mentioning. There are health-related regulations that are focused on occupational disease, like WHMIS and noise and designated substances. And there are other regulations that are cover very specific topics. There's one very specific to firefighter protective equipment. There's one very specific to naloxone kits. There's that occupational health and safety awareness training. And one of the most important things I want you to remember is that some types of regulations apply to all of the work in Ontario. Others apply to very specific kinds of work. So the sector specific or the hazard specific apply to those specific topics. If you don't have confined spaces at all in your workplace, that regulation doesn't apply in your workplace because you don't do that. You don't have those spaces. You don't have that type of hazardous work that's being performed. The noise regulation applies to everyone. A lot of these occupational health regulations do apply to everyone. X-ray safety, if you don't have X-rays, maybe that doesn't apply to you. Are we sharing a recorded session? Yes, at some point, but not right away. Does an employer need to provide a physical Green Book if they have a printed copy of, like a printed off the web? No. You only need to post the act on the Health and Safety Board, not the regulations. So a printed copy of the act itself without printing the regulations is totally fine on the board. You would not need to buy a Green Book. Does that answer the question, Judy? Cool. All right, amazing. We also want to think broadly about our internal responsibility system. Ultimately, it's made up of employers, supervisors, and workers working together. And what you'll find is these duties refer to each other, as well as, we talk about rights versus duties. When we think about something like the right to know, which is a worker right, they also have a set of worker duties. They have to, follow the training. They have to use the equipment as prescribed. So they have duties as well. The employer and supervisor duties, where you have a right to know, your employer and supervisor have a right to provide. So you have a right to know about hazards in your work. Your employer has to provide information, instruction, and training, provide violence and harassment training, WHMIS, written instructions where the regulations prescribe the supervisor duty, and acquaint workers and those in authority over workers with hazards of the work. As you can see, these things go together. You have a right, they have a duty. Also, you have a duty and they have a duty. Different duties for different people. Employer establishes your procedures. Supervisors communicate and enforce those to their staff. Workers have to follow them. Supervisors have to enforce them. If they're not doing that, your puzzle is not complete. I like to think about the internal responsibility system ultimately like a jigsaw puzzle. Let's talk now about reading the sections themselves. So how do we read these? We read them like a choose your own adventure novel. Right now we're on part 3. Parts have uppercase Roman numerals. Sections have regular numbers, Arabic numerals, no parentheses. Subsections have Arabic numerals inside of parentheses. Clauses have lowercase letters in parentheses, and subsections have, or subclauses have lowercase Roman numerals inside parentheses. So ultimately, let's say that I have concerns about the structural adequacy of a building that I'm about to work in, which I absolutely not with WSPS, but I've definitely had this conversation in the past where I'm like, this is, this is not built to any sort of building code, and I think it might collapse on me. Not good. So when I am citing in the Act, I typically don't cite the part. The parts just kind of organize things into a coherent pathway of ideas. I start with the section, and you want to write it exactly as it is. So 25, subsection 1, we're going to go to clause E, and I'm going to include subclause 1 here. You write it like that. Don't capitalize things that are not capitalized. And we are going to start with our sentence stem, which is right here. That's the beginning of the sentence. An employer shall ensure that. And then I come right down here to E. A building structure or any part thereof or any part of a workplace, whether temporary or permanent, is capable of supporting any loads that may be applied to it. I could stop the sentence there and it's grammatically correct. That sketchy building, I could stop there. If I had concerns that the staircase was not going to hold my weight, that could be the end of it. If I had concerns it wasn't built to the building code, I could continue the conversation with, as determined by the applicable design requirements established under the version of the building code that was in force at the time of its construction. And how many times have I said that? A lot. If I have a problem where my employer is not maintaining, if I've got a broken guard on a machine, an employer shall ensure that. Again, we have to start the sentence. The equipment, materials, and protective devices provided by the employer are maintained in good condition. Choose your own adventure. Does that make sense? What I see in terms of pitfalls is folks forgetting the operative. The verb here is the shall. You need and the who. In order to make the complete sentence, you have to start with the sentence stem. Don't skip that. There are also important words like prescribed. It means it's set out in the regulations. Shall means you have to do it and you have to do it now. Will means possibility of future action. If you hire that 6th person, you will then cause a health and safety rep to be selected. May means there's possibility of future action. This is found in the work refusal. A worker may refuse work. What also they do? They may not. You think something is dangerous, please refuse. And means all of the clauses or subclauses are equal. When you look at the employer duties, there's an and. It means it's just as important that your employer provide you with a safe building as it is that they train you, as that they provide you with a supervisor, that the supervisor is competent. All of that's important. It's not that it's one or the other. Or functions like an and. If it's stuff you're not allowed to do, like removing safety devices or horseplay, you're not allowed to do any of them. It can also sometimes function where there's choice, or where you can have only one condition occurring for a circumstance to be declared. In the case of Section 43, you can refuse work because the building is not safe, because the tools are not safe, because workplace violence is at risk, and you only have to have one of those things happening, not all of them happening at once. There are also the definitions. I'm not going to do the activity where we actually look for these, but if you're going to look for one, I would highly recommend that you look for employer, supervisor, and worker. And if you work in an industrial establishment, go and read that one too. Ultimately, I would love for you to look at all of these, but give those definitions a good read when you go back to work. The definition of worker might surprise you. And when we look at the definition of competent, ask yourself, do every one of my supervisors really know how to use this green book? Do they really know the Act and regulations well? And if the answer is no, your supervisors are probably not competent. That's the reality. I don't make the definitions. I just tell people what they are. So how do these things work? Here we have a situation where the Act refers to itself. A member of a committee is entitled to such time as is necessary to carry out the member's duties under sections 26, 27, and 31. These are subsections in the same section. That's a nice way to say, go look at them. You have to go and find, in order to know what this means, go and take a look at what section 26 says, what section 27 says, what section 31 says. By the way, this is all about inspections, investigations, things like that. So where you see it refer to itself, be sure you go and refer where they're telling you. There are also sections that refer to regulations as prescribed. So go and think about which of the regulations apply to you. Are you in healthcare? Are you in mines? Are you in industrial? If you're in industrial, go look for the word, not grinding, not grinder. Look for the word grind. It has fewer letters and you're still going to get what you're looking for. If you're finding search issues where you're like, I'm not getting it, shorten the word. And it will come up. In the case of the grinder, we actually find if we look in industrial that we find a grinding wheel has to be, and it also mentions manufacturer's instructions and specifications. It says you have to follow them, so then you go refer to the manufacturer's instructions as you're setting it up and mounting it. That becomes part of your legal landscape too. If you don't follow the manufacturer's specs, that's going to be a problem if this thing flies apart and hurts someone. There are also sections that refer to codes or standards. Here it says the requirements respecting fire extinguishers apply. Is this covered by hand grinders? It is. Yeah, and if you're in construction, they talked about hand grinders more. This talks more about grinding wheels. But yes, it applies to hand grinders as well. You'll notice that this refers to the fire code. So then you have to go to the fire code to go and figure out in your particular context, are you mercantile? Are you a business? Like what type of occupancy you are, what type, how many and where your fire extinguishers need to be. So it's actually specifying where else to look. All right, the last is staying up to date. How do we stay up to date? The best way to do this is to regularly check on the versions tab to make sure that you're looking at the right version of the OHSA. If you've seen that you're like, ooh, last time I looked at this, it said it was current as of January. Now it says it's current as of October 1st, then something's changed. You can go and take a look also at the Ontario Gazette. It is the official publishing of all of the legislative changes. One of the most recent changes came in the Working for Workers 6 Act, in which case I actually went and looked and read the Working at Workers 6 Act to look and see exactly which sections of the Act and regulations had changed. Look for those grayed out sections. Look to see if there's a date that they are in fact going to become in force. That's how we stay up to date. And that's it. That's the end of the webinar. We do have some great resources for you. If you want to talk more, or if you're like, I'm still confused, reach out to me at tova.larson@wsps.ca, and I'm happy to book a call with you. That doesn't have a space in it. If you still want help figuring out how to use the Green Book, and you're like, I'm still confused, I'm happy to work with you one-on-one, and there's no charge for that. We are a safety association and we have your back. So if you want to book a call, feel free to book a call. You are so welcome. We have some great free resources on our website. We can come to your workplace and do a compliance assessment for no money. We have great training. Come join me for Joint Health and Safety Committee certification or one of my upcoming safety connections. Young workers, what every supervisor needs to know. And you haven't looked at joining the Excellence Program, you need to consider it. It's like your high school math teacher giving you $20 every time you did your calculus homework. How much better at math would we all be? It is a fantastic way for you to be able to get rebates on your WSIB premiums for building a better safety program. I hope you have a great day. I'm hoping that this was a valuable session for you. If you are still here, drop it in the chat. What was your favorite takeaway? Of all the things that we learned today, what was your like aha moment where you thought, oh, this is the most useful thing I've seen since sliced bread? If you have one of those takeaways, I would love to know what it is, just because I'm always curious what people's favorite thing was. And using e-laws, will there be a recording? Yes, there'll be a recording of my ramblings that will be shared at some point. We have to like do the post-production on it, so it's not going to be shared right away, but it will be shared in the future that you can share with your friends. And then they can hear the same bad jokes that you did. Yeah, if you've got, again, any other great takeaways, and if you have questions still, feel free to stay online. I'm happy to answer questions that drop into the chat in the next couple of minutes. Feel free to go and knowing the year part after the regulations. Yeah, that just even that little tidbit of what that is. the parameters for ELAs, using ELAs as a game changer. I know, right? And they've really improved it. If you haven't used ELAs in a while and you maybe tried it like a year ago and you thought, oh, this is really hard to use, they've totally updated ELAs to make it easier for you. Yeah, I thought it was random. It is not random. They're all my favorite. I'm definitely taking your idea for coloring the sides of the green book, right? Like, this is the low-tech version of, and you can do that with the industrial establishment regulation with a different color. Like, I would typically go with the top three that I use, and the top three that I use are industrial, the OHSA. I use control of exposure to biological and chemical agents quite a lot. Biological and chemical agents, I interchange those. I use LEMIS quite a bit. Those are some of the ones that I use the most. Last thoughts, last questions, last favorite takeaways before we drop off the session. Waiting for the questions. You're so welcome. This was like the short version. If you want the deep dive version, by the way, sign your folks up for Safety, Health, and the Law. We spend an entire day, 8:30 to 4:30, just digging deep into what we just did. And if you want an even deeper dive, feel free to sign up for Joint Health and Safety Committee certification, where we do the deepest dive of all. It is 5 days of the OHSA regulations, basic health and safety principles, and you spend like a day and a half just digging into the act itself, and then you spend 2 days of certification learning in depth about the regulations. If you, super plug for both of those courses. Safety, Health, and Law, it's 1 day. It is a fantastic course for your supervisors. Certification, I think every supervisor should take certification at least once in their life. But I'm biased because I teach a lot of certification, but those are really wonderful resources if you want to do the deeper dive.